I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual Brown Bag Lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, I'm Tom Lochner, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We're excited to be a partner with Extension to bring you research-backed resources, tools, and tips to keep Wisconsin marshes productive and profitable.
So welcome to our May virtual brown bag cranberry growing season updates. We are going to have a good panel of information from our experts today. And in terms of housekeeping, if you want to keep yourself muted unless you're asking a question, we do encourage people to ask questions throughout, and I'm going to be moderating the chat. So if you have a question that you want to unmute yourself and ask, go for it. If you have a question you want to type into the chat, I'll be watching the chat. And then also if you want to ask an anonymous question in the drop-down, choose just Allison Jonjak, and then I'll read that question out on your behalf anonymously. There are also closed captions available if that is preferred for you for accessing versus audio. And so just click that little ... and show closed captions. So welcome to our May virtual brown bag cranberry growing season updates. We are going to have a good panel of information from our experts today. And in terms of housekeeping, if you want to keep yourself muted unless you're asking a question, we do encourage people to ask questions throughout, and I'm going to be moderating the chat. So if you have a question that you want to unmute yourself and ask, go for it. If you have a question you want to type into the chat, I'll be watching the chat. And then also if you want to ask an anonymous question in the drop-down, choose just Allison Jonjak, and then I'll read that question out on your behalf anonymously. There are also closed captions available if that is preferred for you for accessing versus audio. And so just click that little ... and show closed captions. With that, I'll give pass the mic over to Tom Lochner, who will give us a welcome on behalf of the Wisconsin Cranberry State Growers Association. So I will offer that to you, Tom.
Oh, well, thank you, Allison, and good afternoon to everybody. Our monthly brown bags continue, and I'm glad to see so many growers that are participating today. Just a couple of quick things for you to mark on your calendar that are coming up is on the 14th of June will be the Cranberry Open at Bullseye Country Club in Wisconsin Rapids, and the registrations are open. Whether you're a golfer or not, it's a good time to get out and interact with fellow growers and members of the cranberry community. And it's always a fun time and a good day. If you need information, I know Alex has sent out registration forms, and we can always steer you in the right direction if you have any questions about getting involved. Second item is we will be holding the summer meeting this year again at the research station on August 9th. That information is going out as well and will be in the next issue of the WSCGA News. We hope to see you all there. We're going to have maybe a program that's a little similar in format as last year. We'll have a lot of new things to talk about that's going on at the station and within the industry. So hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks to Allison and Alex for putting the program together again today, and for all of our speakers who are joining us this afternoon. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Allison, and hope everybody has a good weekend, and we'll get some sleep and won't have to be up watching frost.
That's always the good hope. Thanks, Tom. So we've got oh no, my photos overlapped my text, but we've got a really good selection of speakers today. Pamela Verhulst from Ladybug IPM is going to give us an overview of what she's been seeing in the field. Oops, I advanced a little too fast. And then John Moss and Paul Potter are both going to speak on the benefits of data collection and what data management can do for your marsh. And then we'll close up with Amaya Atucha on a lot of our spring questions, especially focusing on leaf drop and on side shooting. And then I will jump back to my screen and hopefully Amaya is ready to jump into our Q&A with Amaya session.
Hi. So Pam, I'm gonna put you on the spot, but you said you provide me some information prior to this meeting about what you were seeing out there, and you were seeing a lot of leaf drop in some places, and so I want to talk a little bit about what I think might be the reasons why we see leaf drop. So we were talking with Joshna actually the other day about this and how it relates to just stress. So when we have, when the plants stress, one of the hormones that is released is something that's called ethylene. And ethylene, you might, I don't know if you have any recollection, it also has a lot to do with fruit ripening. So when you put like bananas and avocados together, that banana is, producing a lot of this ethylene and is making the fruit ripe. But it also affects the abscission layer that is produced where the leaves are connected to the stem. And so when there's ethylene, that abscissal layer gets formed, and that's when we see that drop of those leaves. And so one of the causes of these could be, a stress in the plant that is producing this ethylene, and then we're seeing these drops of the leaves early in the spring. Now, what could those stress be? And so there's this question here in the chat about whether it's, water, winter water, or like harvest damage. And without doing any research, what I've always thought about this is that, there's something maybe in early winter before we flood for ice, maybe some, cold event that might be affecting some leaves that might not be cold hardy enough at that stage. We know from the research that has been done in my lab and my student Camila Villota and also Beth Workmaster work really a lot in this project, looking at the bud physiology, what was happening with the bud. And one of the things that we discovered is that the buds in their structure itself, they seem to have some sort of protection, some anatomical protection to the cold when they're formed in the summer and in the early fall, that from that point on, it only increases their capacity to withstand cold temperatures. However, that's really not necessarily the case for the leaves. The leaves they have to go through this process of adaptation, the same as the buds, but they don't have an anatomical barrier that helps them protect from the ice formation. So when I think about leaf damage, I think that it could be possible that sometimes in warmer falls, those leaves take a little bit longer to acclimate to cold. And so even when the temperatures might not get excessively, cold, very freezing temperatures in the fall, that might be enough to produce some damage on the leaves that results in this drop of the leaves in the fall. Okay, so that would be one thing. I remember that one of the questions that I've received in the past is about light, and whether the thickness of the ice and maybe the amount of snow that is on that ice could be, blocking light and could potentially be, the cause of this leaf drop. And I don't have a clear answer for that, but when I think about cranberries growing in the wild, where they're covered with all that snow and sometimes like really, really, really thick layers of snow, I mean, they are in the dark. So that's what happened in nature. So I wouldn't think that would be a factor that would be affecting them and the reason why we see the leaf drop. The other reason why I don't think it has to do with light and the thickness of the ice and the amount of snow that you have in top is because the leaves turn red for a reason. And I think I've talked about this before, is that the red color is basically like a sunscreen. If they were not red and they were green and the chlorophyll will be present there and exposed to the light in the freezing conditions of the winter, we will have a lot of damage to the photosystems within those cells, and that will result in actually a lot of leaf damage. So that's why they develop that red color. It's a way of protecting themselves because they're not able to produce any photosynthesis during the winter with cold temperatures. And so they also block that light by using these anthocyanins in the leaves. So I don't think that has to do with that. Then when it comes to spring flooding, if the leaves are dormant, I mean, if the plant is still dormant and the leaves are not reactivated, there's no appearance again of that chlorophyll, I really don't think that short flooding in the spring is the reason why we see these. I don't think it's stressful enough to produce this kind of response. It feels to me like it's something that might have happened before we make ice. But that is my best guess estimate of why this is happening. And if, I don't know, Pam, if you have any comments about when you normally see these, or if growers have any comments about experiencing these and what are certain conditions that they have identified, I mean, that we could bring this up to keep discussing this subject.
Sure. So historically, Ben Lear, and there's people on this call that could attest, Ben Lear seemed more like finicky. So we have seen patterns where the snow was thick along the edges, and then the Ben Lear did have leaf drop. And that's where that idea comes from. Oh, well, maybe something with the snow coverage. This spring, some growers are like, yep, every time I flooded, I lost more and more leaves. But does that mean the flood was doing it? Or like you said, was it injured before? Mm-hmm. And then there's properties, one side of the property, they have leaf drop and the other side they don't. And then that was another question, like different varieties or different cultivars, does this matter? Does the hybrids, or if it has a Ben Lear in it? So I don't know if we know those answers and why some are more susceptible to dropping than others, but sometimes we can find a pattern, but this spring it's kind of hard.
I've also, just to add, seen leaf drop in low areas and not in higher or average areas as well. So just one other pattern that might fit in along the ditch edges. So, okay, so here's what I think. I think that there could definitely be a variety component, but because there are some varieties that might be more susceptible than others to stress. And so one of the things that comes to mind when you say, oh, we see it more in one variety than the other, is that we tend to see a lot of drop of fruits on apple trees close to harvest, and not all varieties do that. So that is certainly like some varieties that are easier or they're stressed more easily, they will, have this response of dropping, in this case of the apples, the fruit. In this case, we're just dropping the leaves. But it's that production of ethylene. So there might be a threshold of stress that differs between cultivars. Then when it comes to the edges, well, there's a lot of things happening on the edges. Sometimes we don't have like really good, irrigation, or, the entering and the exiting of machinery on the exit. So then those are the edges that are first, when the ice is melting, those are the areas that are first exposed during early spring. So I think that the edges, I wouldn't necessarily point out to the amount of snow. I think that the edges in general tend to behave a little bit different. So it might be that they're more exposed to stress than other parts of the bed. So unfortunately, I don't really have a clear answer why. As I said, I think that is mostly related to some stress that might have happened not in the spring, but rather before we made ice. And that the flooding is removing more and more leaves just because you're flooding and it's just taking away. But I don't think that this is an effect of the flooding in the spring. So my favorite question to ask after this is, all right, suppose I'm in my bed and I'm looking at photos like Pam sent in on the left or right there. What do I do to recover?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think that I explained this before, that in the fall, when those leaves are turning red, there's a remobilization of some of those nutrients that were in when the leaves were green and actively producing photosynthesis, especially things like nitrogen, that they are stored in the uprights and on the roots. And then when the leaves turn green again in the spring, those nutrients go back to those leaves, even these older leaves, to start producing photosynthesis. So when the leaf drop happens early, like we see it now, before before the plants get out of dormancy, I feel that there's not a huge nutrient lost when that happens, because those nutrients are still being stored in the upright itself and in the root system and in the runners. So it has not been put back into the leaves again. So we're not losing a lot of nutrients. What we are losing is those leaves that would be producing carbohydrates and photosynthesis early on, until that new portion of the upright is photosynthetically active. So at this time, that new growth is being supported by reserves, and there's no other leaves that can be producing carbohydrates. So what I would do at this point is watch out for those patches in which you don't have any leaves, and look at the quality of the new growth, the changing of the color of those new leaves. Those new leaves will become photosynthetically active by the time we get to bloom. Okay, and they will have enough, probably more than enough nutrients to be producing enough carbohydrates. Some of the research done, a lot of research, I think it was mostly done in Massachusetts, shows that removing the old leaves doesn't have such a huge impact on fruit set and final fruit size and yield as it have when you remove the new leaves that are coming out of the upright. So those leaves are basically the ones that are providing all of the carbohydrates needed for developing the fruit. So I would not go and jump into applying fertilizer right now. I would just look at the quality of the growth. And then probably when the time that you get to bloom, maybe you would want to start fertilizing, maybe a week earlier than you would normally do, so that those new leaves have enough nitrogen to produce the carbohydrates that are needed to set that fruit and grow that fruit. But I think at this stage, it's kind of pointless to apply any fertilizer, unless you see that growth is very, very stunted, that they're not developing, they're still red, and they're not turning green as the new leaves develop.
So we're going to want to go out, the action that we want to take if we've got these spots with a lot of leaf drop is go out on a regular basis, maybe once or twice a week, and check on the color and check on the development, and make sure that we are seeing those turn green at least as fast as we're seeing their counterparts that didn't have leaf drop turn green.
Yeah, especially the first leaves that are emerging from that roughneck, those should, be turning green. If those are still very yellow and pale, as the upright continues to elongate, that means that there could potentially be some nitrogen deficiency. But I would not jump the gun right now and just go ahead and put a lot of nitrogen fertilizer at this point.
Okay.
So you mentioned a week sooner. Are we talking 5 units a week sooner, or your normal plan? How much nitrogen?
No, I reduce doses that it would be your normal plan. So if you would normally put your first application and you would put 14 units, I would just go for half of that and then see how they react.
Mm-hmm. And the big emphasis, as always, on stepping out and checking vine development and upright color and upright vigor in order to adaptively inform our nitrogen plans.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the open Q&A session, and I did want to talk about side shooting also. I think we had questions about that. Pam, if you want to put a finer point on it, or Amaya, if you want to give us an overview of what it can mean when we see side shoots and what we should do about it.
So the main question was, why am I seeing it again? So if, I don't know, you can kind of review some potential reasons why we're seeing side shooting. And then, you know, I think we saw last year, most situations it ended up, we had a reproductive uprates coming out of those. And then some, even in these pictures, you can see that there's going to be vegetative side shoots coming out of some of these buds. But yeah, just kind of possible causes and what to worry about, any kind of management advice.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know the cause of the side shooting. I can tell you from a, you know, plant physiology perspective, what might be happening there. So I think that most of you are familiar with the concept of apical dominance, in which you have a main bud on, you know, the apical portion of that upright, that when it starts developing will start producing plant hormones that are called auxins, and that those will inhibit the growth of those lateral buds. However, what it seems to me that might be happening here, when that apical bud is not actively growing, is not, you know, coming out of dormancy, or it's not, you know, it's damaged, what happens is that those lateral buds take advantage of that opportunity because there's nothing suppressing them, and they just break. And, you know, we see that some of them have floral meristems and some of them don't have floral meristems. And then it's kind of like another layer of complication here. But I think it has to do with what's happening with the apical bud, and whether sometimes it comes delayed, because we see first the lateral shooting, and then I remember last year, and then those apical buds took a little bit longer to break, but they finally did, and they had flowers. So I haven't done an assessment of if there's a negative impact of having those side shoots when it comes to yield. If the apical meristem comes out afterwards and have flowers, is that side shooting really affecting that? The question is more about, are we just seeing the side shooting and there's damage to the apical meristem that it never comes out, and then those side shootings, if they don't have any flowers, well, I mean, you did lose your yield potential on that upright. So that would be something to follow up with, just, you know, people that saw a lot of these last year, when they actually did see that their main apical bud did come out eventually and had berries, did having vegetated side buds affected it at all? And I would be surprised that it would have affected negatively the yield. But I don't know, Pam, if you have any observations about that.
It changed by situation, but something, can you make clear, this is the plant's decision, right? There's nothing a grower can do to help this plant produce more. If it has these side shoots, it's already decided whether it's reproductive or vegetative.
Well, yes, I mean, and that happened, and we've talked about this, how, you know, the decision whether a bud will be reproductive or vegetative happens the summer before. So that decision on that bud happens in July, August of the year before. So by that time, the future of that bud has been decided. It's not that, you know, floral meristems are going to be appearing from nowhere. There's a whole process and a long process for it to happen. So there's no management. There's nothing that we can change in the way that we do to avoid this lateral shooting. The only thing would be the protection of the meristem of the main bud, if that is the case why we're seeing the side shooting. In the case that we see that the main bud, it's breaking, but also we have lateral ones, there's no way of controlling that.
I do want to remind folks we've got about 2 minutes left to go ahead and ask questions, whether they are questions for Amaya or for Pam or for John and Paul, or any other questions that are on your mind here as we wrap up May and move into June. I know we've already got the next June brown bag scheduled for June 16th. So have that on your calendar, and Alex and I will send out invitations as we get closer. But do go ahead and ask questions, and we can let Amaya talk more about meristem production in the 2 minutes while we wait for questions to come in, or unless we just say, all right, happy to take questions.
Yeah, if people have questions, I'm happy to try to have answers for them. I don't know if I always have,
I
definite
wonder if
answer.
I can make a quick poll. Carl had asked, since moss seems worse this year than other years, I'm just going to really fast ask, is your moss worse than usual? And just say worse, not worse, or hard to tell. Just to see how prevalent that opinion is. Let's see if hopefully you guys see that poll arisen. So if you are not a grower, hands off the mouse and let the growers answer, but growers can answer whether they are seeing worse moss than usual, not worse moss than usual, or hard to tell, or kind of a toss-up. It looks like actually we only have 9% of growers saying that their moss is worse this year than usual. 73% say that their moss is not worse than usual, and 18% are saying that it's hard to tell. I'm going to push end poll and see if I can share the results. So we seems like that might be a subjective observation on some marshes and not others. Thanks, everyone. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank Tom and Alex for helping host as part of the Growers Association. I want to thank the Education Committee for helping us have topics to discuss. And of course, thanking Amaya and Paul and John and Pam for joining us to share their thoughts and observations. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month.